Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Hamza Islam. And before I talk about my guest this week, I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone who listened to the podcast or the first episode, excuse me. I received a lot of really good comments, comments such as coming from, how the conversation went to how to improve the podcast experience going forward. And I'm not gonna lie, I was really scared about this first episode because it had been so long since I've last done a podcast. I was scared that I was going to lose the podcast or I was going to worry a lot for whatever reason. But I felt that after the podcast, I felt that it was great conversation. I felt that what was said was very insightful. So I if you haven't seen the first episode, I recommend that you go ahead and check that out when you get the chance. But I really enjoyed my conversation with Julian Pavoni, the world's youngest professional drummer and one of the world's youngest inventors. So I just want to thank Julian and his team for making this happen. It was truly an awesome conversation, and I really hope that these are the conversations I have going forward in the future. Now, transitioning to my next guest. My guest this week is Illinois State Representative-elect Nabeela Syed, who in just a few days as of this recording will be one of the youngest members of the Illinois General Assembly. I am so glad that we're able to have this conversation, given the fact that she's going to be on a very, very busy schedule as soon as she becomes inaugurated, which will occur by the time this episode comes out. So the fact that we were able to find a way to schedule this was a dream come true in a way. But just a little description or a little bio about Illinois State Representative-elect Nabeela Syed. She's only 23 years old, which is insane. And during her campaign, she received a lot of skepticism and doubts because she's only 23 years old. But I don't know how she was able to do it. A lot of young people have great ideas, don't get me wrong, but the fact that she was able to win her race on election night despite her age was incredible. And so when I got a chance to meet her during the campaign, at least virtually, and it was great talking to her, and I could see the passion she has in making her community better. And I think that her story, regardless if you're into politics or not, is an example of the emphasis on not giving up. There are a lot of people that are going to question you, that will try to bring you down, that will say that, oh, you're not good enough, or maybe it's not your turn. But people like her put emphasis on just the motivation to keep going and not letting any hateful words or any negative criticisms about her, not in terms of policy, I mean like her as a person, it never defined her. She just kept going and going and proved people wrong along this journey. And I know she's going to have to prove people wrong when she's officially inaugurated. So to be able to talk to her was awesome. And I just want to add that I actually recorded the conversation first and then the introduction and conclusion last. I ran into some computer issues, but I'm just going to come out here and say that the conversation was really insightful. I really hope that you guys learn a few things about her or just learn about understanding why you want to do something. We all have great ideas, but I think something that maybe people don't understand is the why you want to do something. Why should people think that you're the person that is best to, I was going to say take over the wheel, but I guess the best to take over. Let's just put it that way. So I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. And it was also cool because she is also Muslim. So and she is South Asian. As someone who is also Muslim and South Asian, it was really cool to be able to have a conversation with someone who is like me. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Illinois State Representative-elect Nabeela Syed. Illinois State Representative-elect Nabeela Syed. Welcome to the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm excited as well, and I want to start this podcast by congratulating you. You are just a few days away from being the youngest elected member of the Illinois General Assembly.
One of the youngest, I will say that, among the youngest, yes.
You won back in election day, and I remember like when I heard about your election, victory, I was so happy for you. I really was. And even though I'm from a different state, I was just so happy for you. And then I thought, okay, we better get Nabeela now because you're gonna be so busy going forward. Um, but I honestly want to talk about election or what life has been like for you because you have, I mean, there's no doubt that election day has changed your life since your victory. And now that you're just like days away before being inaugurated, I would like to start the podcast by talking about what's been going through your mind these past few weeks and months, and also these next few days, knowing that you're going to be inaugurated soon.
Yeah, I think since being elected on November 8th, we got the election results around like 10 p.m. This was a Republican held seat previously, and we flipped it to Democrat. So the victory, we thought it would come down to 500 votes either way, losing or winning. It'd probably be within 500 votes. And thankfully, on election night, we were above 600 votes when I think we finally called the election. And then throughout the night, it went up to 1,700 votes. And now, with all the votes counted, with all the mail in ballots back, it's I think nearly 2,900 votes. So 6.6%. We won by 6.6%. So it was an incredible, exciting time. And we just felt very blown away with the community's response. But since then, it has been still going,
Right.
which is such a blessing. Such a blessing to be on this side of things. So I've been doing a lot of learning. I've been speaking to my future colleagues, learning from folks that have been in Springfield, continuing to learn from community members and understand what exactly we could get done for our community down in Springfield. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff.
Let's start from the beginning because I think it's fair to say because you are only 23, 24 years old, right? 23?
I'm 23, yes.
23 years old. You're an example of, I feel like, especially with this election, we've seen a lot of young people, especially like the Gen Z generation, be involved in politics and public office. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people were inspired by the 2016 election, regardless if they voted for Trump or for Hillary Clinton or whoever. And you were one of those people that really started the idea of running for public office since because of that election. But I want to start by talking about like the idea of running for state representative. You wanted to go out there and create change for people, but talk about the idea of start like what led you to run for state representative in the first place.
Yeah, so I guess just touching a little bit on the 2016 election, I think many people felt more compelled to get involved politically. And I don't think, that was like my defining moment for wanting to run for actually run for public office, but it definitely was my turning point to realize that I wanted to work in politics. And then actually coming to the decision of state representative, I was working on some school board races with my good friend, and we were trying to get good candidates elected out here in the suburbs of Illinois for the school district that I grew out of. So this is close to home. This is something that impacts me as someone that lives in the community, but then also it would have impacted me if I was a student, just a few years later than I was. So it meant a lot to me to make sure that young people in our community were being taken care of by their elected officials. And some of the elected officials that are most relevant in their lives are their school board members. And seeing the kind of people that were wanting to run for office was for those specific seats was a little scary to me. There were people that were wanting to run that didn't have the community's best interests at heart, didn't have students' best interests at heart. And when you're running for a school board position and it's not resonating with folks in the community, why exactly you want to run, if students aren't at the center of why you're running, there's an issue there. So we went on to win the seats that we wanted to win in that race, and we were able to help and support some of those candidates, which is very exciting. But after that, I was kind of looking at what to do next. I was starting my work, and this was my job out of college, and I was very excited for it, but I wanted to do some more work. And as a young person, my first idea was to help someone unseat the Republican that's been sitting in this seat for a while, for a good portion of my life, who I didn't feel was representing our community well. And as a young person, I was like, well, I would work on a campaign. Maybe they'd let me be campaign manager. Maybe they'd let me do this or this or that. Maybe I could just volunteer in my free time. And then my friend suggested that I should run for office. And initially, as a young person, I was like, there's no way I could do that. I'm just too young. But then slowly but surely, the idea started to become something much more realistic. And state policy is very important. The more local you get with public office, the more impact I believe it has on people's day-to-day lives. So when we're talking about education, when we're talking about the funding of education and the quality of education, but then also property taxes, gun violence reform, or gun safety reform, reproductive healthcare in general, like those things can be impacted at the state level. And I was very excited about a lot of those issues. And ultimately, that's how we came to this decision of running.
I think a lot of people, when it comes to deciding to create change or deciding to change or like affect the community in a good way, I think a lot of the things are much easier said than done. And it's been proven because I remember when I met you, I knew you were busy, but then when I actually got to experience like how busy you were, I'm like, oh wow, Nabeela's really busy. I think one of the most difficult things, and you kind of touched on it, was like the initial reaction to like the idea of running because you're like, I'm only 23 years old. I don't know if I can do it. And especially, it's not just the age, but also a person of color. You are Indian American, you are Muslim, and that's what you are proud about. But like, I want to know when you're kind of spreading the word out, there's always going to be people that will criticize you, but more because of like the type of person you are rather than like your actual policies. So like I would want to know like how you handle those initial reactions when people were like, I don't know, and it's like, is it because of her, the like Nabeela the person, or like Nabeela's plans? Because I think like I read somewhere throughout your journey where people told you no because
Mhm.
of the person you are and not more so about the policy aspect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is something that many young people are affected by when they want to get involved in spaces where they're not traditionally represented. They're often met with things like responses like, wait your turn, or not yet, this is not your time. Let someone more qualified do this. Let someone who's a bit older do this. And that is the response that we got from a few folks when I initially floated the idea of running. And this was even before we launched. This was before anything became official. When I was looking and turning to folks for advice, I was sometimes met with this caution, and sometimes it was well intentioned, and sometimes it was just to maintain the status quo, to maintain the way that politics is typically run, the types of people that typically run for office, and alienate those that aren't traditionally represented in these spaces. So I remember, experiencing that firsthand and feeling very dejected at times. I remember even before we launched, I curled up into bed, and like this is well before we had faced any of the things that we faced during the campaign, which I would say were far worse. But somehow, before we even launched, I had a conversation, and that just left me feeling so upset. Like I remember sitting there and being like, there's no there, if this person doesn't believe I could do it, no one will believe it. It's not possible. And it was rooted in good intention, right? It was rooted in wanting to actually flip this seat, because I did not like the policies of the previous representative. I thought they were harmful. And people making me question whether or not I could actually do it. But no one ever questioned whether my primary opponent could really do it. And there were reasons why. There were reasons related to who I am, what I look like, and especially my age. And slowly but surely, I think throughout the campaign, folks began to understand that what we were doing and the kind of movement that we were creating out here in the suburbs. But I think the primary election day, that evening when we got the results, it kind of became clear that like, hey, maybe this campaign understands what's going on. Maybe they have a plan, and maybe they can actually flip the seat. And I think that's when folks actually started believing in us even more so. There were lots of people that came on board in the primary, so many folks that were very supportive throughout the process. But after the primary, I think that's when we reached a point where folks were like, hey, maybe they could actually flip the seat. And I will say, though, people were still skeptical till the day of the general election. But I'm grateful for the primary margin that we had that showcased the hard work that we were putting in.
Before we talk more about the primaries, because that's one of the things where like I knew that you were passionate about it, and I knew a lot of people were saying good things about you, but I felt like that was the moment where I was like, okay, wait, what kind of candidate is Nabeela? And because as someone who's from the state of Ohio, I don't understand what's going on in Illinois, but I can understand like oh, the fact that they won by this much is impressive. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about the why aspect of like why you decided to run for state representative. And it would be inappropriate of me for me to talk to you without mentioning where you're from. You are very passionate about the city you're from. You're from this Palatine, Illinois, and that was something that you were very proud of. Like you were proud of like where you came from. I think when I met you, you said like some, I might be mixing up my metaphors, but it's like you were like a daughter to the city or something like that. I
I don't
don't
know
know.
about a daughter to the city. I might have been referring to like my Masjid community here, but
Oh,
yeah, but like Palatine, it
talk a bit
means
about like what the city means to you. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely means a lot to me. Sorry, I'm trying to oh, my blink. There you go. The Palatine definitely means a lot to me just because this is where I was born and raised. When my parents came, they immigrated from India, and when they came and when they settled down somewhere, they picked Palatine. And I grew up here. Remember I grew up across from this Kmart, and then it became a Sears, and they demolished all of that, and they made a Mariano's, and this is my home. And now I live in Inverness, which is just a town over. It's like 5 minutes away from my previous home. It's a small residential community, but I went to all the public schools I went to were located in Palatine. My friends, the people I grew up around, my neighbors, my masjid community, it's from this suburban area. And it meant a lot to me to be able to go door to door and tell people that I am from this community, that I grew up here, I lived here, I understand what a lived experience is like growing up in our suburbs, but there's a lot that I also don't understand. And that's why I went to community members to understand, to fill in the gaps, to see how I could best support them in the state legislature. I also feel very passionate about the suburbs.
No, that's something that really stuck out to me is that there are many politicians where or political candidates that will go out and say like, "Hi, I'm so and so. I need your vote." And something that really stuck out to me as well about you is you're not someone that wants to be seen as a politician. You're not someone that wants to be seen as a candidate. You go door to door asking people about, obviously you're going to talk about like who you are and like why you need their help, but you also emphasize the importance of talking to a person as if like you're just like a normal citizen. Like there's no like sometimes like when it comes to politicians, they're like, I want to talk to you because I need your help to get elected, but you're someone that actually emphasizes the importance of starting a conversation with people in your community. And it's always it's such a cliche thing, but I would love to know, like, especially from your perspective, when you're going around and talking to people, regardless of who they are, the importance of having a conversation. It's such a cliche thing, but it's
No.
really important as far as how to make society better, regardless if it's local, state, or national level.
No, I appreciate you asking that and you mentioning that because the importance of a conversation, I think it is considered cliche. It's considered something that is seems obvious, but it's unfortunate how not obvious it becomes to some people that operate in the political space, that operate in spaces where there is a bit more contention, a bit more divisiveness. And I think even with some of the folks in the community that like, we might be on opposite sides of the spectrum. I believe in supporting an assault weapons ban, making sure that we don't have any military style assault weapons on our streets. And then they might believe in absolutely no restrictions on guns and, that along those lines. And they might think it's X, Y, and Z, like a threat to our country to even advocate for those types of things. But I know for a fact that some folks that hold those opinions that are very drastically different than my own, because we had a conversation and because they saw that we were able to at least discuss issues in a cordial manner, despite disagreeing, they felt compelled to vote for me because of that. And I think that's the power. Someone emailed the other day, and I'm not even in office yet, but they had a list of reasons as to not support this bill. I can't even vote on this bill technically. They're in lame duck session right now. I won't even be able to do anything until January 12th, to be honest, but they explain all their issues with this bill, and I explained to them that I can't actually vote on it yet, but I appreciate their concern. I took note of it, we put it into our system, and they responded with a thank you. And someone that seems so fired up and charged about something that we may not see eye to eye on they still appreciated the conversation, even if it was through email communication. So I think that is something that we're missing. We're also missing like a sense of honesty, and we're seeing that more on the national level. And I am concerned about how that plays out when it comes to facts, when it comes to media. And for our campaign, it was important to display a campaign that was engaging with the community, that was intent on making connections and building community, as opposed to and doing this a year round while we were campaigning, but then also continuing to do it even when I'm in office. Because when I'm working for people in the community, I need to continue to be understanding and listening to what folks are doing and what they're thinking in this district. So that's something we don't plan on stopping.
I want to transition to the Democratic primaries because that was when I think many people would agree that that was when people started to take notice of you because given your age, people, I mean, obviously, like when someone is young, like 23 years old, there's always going to be skepticism. I mean, yeah, a person has really good ideas, but the fact is that you ended up winning, not just winning, but you won by a huge margin. But I wanted to know, like, what was going through your mind when you found out that you had won? Because, like, I mean, it's not the end of the war or the end of the war because you obviously have the actual election,
Yeah.
but winning the Democratic primaries has to be one of those like surreal moments because, I mean, even that itself, like even the primaries itself, is not easy as well.
Yeah, I think the weeks leading up to it, there were many moments where like I'd show up at people's doors and they were so excited. They were so excited about me running for office. And it was like truly, I never felt, I think closer to the election, yeah, I was definitely scared. And you're a little anxious, you're nervous, and that comes out in all sorts of ways. But I think a few weeks leading up to it, I was fairly calm because I was like, I'm having the best conversations at the doors. Like, these people are so nice. They're so kind. They're so grateful that I even showed up. And like, that's the bare minimum that you could do as a candidate, right? But they were
Right.
so excited and grateful. And I was feeling great. I was on cloud nine most of the days when I'd come back home. Um, and that's when I started questioning myself. That's where the anxiety started settling in. I was like, am I imagining this? And I was like, everyone seems to know about me. No one really seems to know about my opponent. They all seem to be voting for me. But what am I missing here? Um, and I remember thinking, I was like, maybe people are right. Like, maybe people will just look at me and my opponent and they might just pick my opponent. Maybe they'll see her name, which is, very different from mine. And maybe they'll be like, oh, that's a name that sounds a bit more familiar. I know more people with this name. I'll vote for her. And I was questioning like the work that we've been doing for the past year. Like, it was, I think, 9 months at that point to gain the support and the trust and the connection with the community. And election day, I remember the results came in really quickly. Like, I was driving to our election night gathering. And so once we got to the election night party, it would seem like at that point we had already known the election results and people were already clapping as we walked in. And it was reassuring to know that what everyone had been saying in the beginning about people would not vote for someone who looks like you. You can't win in a district like this. Like, comparing me and my opponent and being like, this is a more electable person. They wouldn't say it explicitly, but that's what they meant. That's what they were saying in the beginning. But to see that, like, in fact, that didn't end up being true, and that what we did worked, and we just got to do it again twice as hard, three times more, to make sure that we actually flip the seat and do what we came here to do.
So from the Democratic primaries through on to the day of the election, a lot of people are taking notice of who you are. People are starting to notice that this is a candidate that actually might go end up in winning the actual election. You received endorsement from so many people from all walks of life, whether it's politicians and different organizations, and you're getting close to the finish line, and there's a lot of excitement. But I mean, before you end up finding out that you won, was there a part of you that felt like, or maybe you did feel this way, where even though there was like this level of excitement, all the people that are trying to like endorse you and support you, that you may end up falling short and not ending up being where you are just a few days from now.
Yeah, and I think it is surprising how much calmer I was in the general election than I was in the primary election. But I came into it equipped with the fact that, like, I am doing my best. I was doing my best. A lot of the folks on our team were doing our best. We were doing everything that we could have done. We put our heart into it. And sometimes doing your best isn't enough, but maybe it just wasn't meant to be. And maybe our work still had impact. Being able to have these conversations, get young kids involved in politics that hadn't previously been, to get people excited and inspired and feeling a bit more better about politics than they might have done the previous cycle, that was winning in a sense. It feels nice to be on the other side of it and say that we won those ways, but we also won the election in general. But there were many times where I'd come home after a long day of canvassing and I'd be like, what's going to happen? Is this going to work out the way we wanted to? And I was exhausted. I was very tired and feeling that like it might not result in the way we want it to. It was not easy, but every single day leading up to the general election, we just had to keep moving forward and thinking about how much time and effort so many people put into it, knowing it's one thing for me to put in this effort, but another thing for people who are not me, like people to dedicate time, energy, hours, their money into a race they don't know whether or not it will win. That is what kept pushing me forward, because if other people can believe in me, then I have to believe in myself.
Let's talk about the actual result, because we're not going to play hypothetical. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
what they did winning. You ended up winning. I remember like I was following a lot of election races, but then I was following this one closely. Even though I'm from the state of Ohio, I was like, I don't care. Tell me what's happening in the state of Illinois. I remember when it was like, I think it was your tweet when I found out that you won. You gave this Optimus Prime like introduction where you said, "I am Nabeela Syed. I am an Indian American Muslim, and I just became one of the youngest members of the Illinois State or Illinois General Assembly." And I remember like I saw somewhere where you kind of were talking about your reaction to winning. And one of the first things you said, and I feel like this is something many young people say, was, "I'm not supposed to be here." And I want to know, like, when you found out that you won and like going through when you're talking to people and you're thanking everybody, what is going through your mind that time? And like how it was different from compared to when you won the primaries.
I think, like you mentioned earlier, the primaries, it came with a caveat that there was another battle. There was another race to be won. But there was a very different kind of relief on election night for the general election, because there will be battles in the future. There's other stateside stuff, many other things to do. But in that moment, the campaign was over and we got the result that we were working so hard for. So to be able to bask in that excitement and that gratitude was an incredible feeling. And I don't even remember. I do think you're right. I think you're totally right that I said like I'm not supposed to be here. And now I would say to that version of Nabeela that no, you are supposed to be here, and not just you, but many other young people are supposed to be here. And I'm hoping that if anything, our victory reassures young people that we have a place in politics and that we're here to stay, and that all these policies that all these politicians want to make on our behalf for our communities, for our country, for our state, they impact us the most, and they impact people who are younger than us the most. And we have to live with the consequences of these decisions. And there has been this ongoing frustration where, as I've been learning more, I've realized that some of the problems in Illinois, they started years before I was born. They continued on when I was 1 year old. Like, the way that some politicians have treated our state and treated our finances is going to damage my future and the future of many people my age. So I want to make sure that whatever I can do with the amazing group of colleagues that I will be working with in just a few short days, to make sure that people 20 years down the line aren't suffering from the consequences of the decisions that we make today, and that we're working to rectify the problems that were created by the generations before me.
Couple of questions before I let you go. My first one is politics is one of the most dangerous fields, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And one thing that many politicians or many people fall into the trap of is grabbing for power and being
Yes.
someone that people did not want to vote for. Once you become officially inaugurated, people are going to start wondering if the Nabeela Syed that we saw during the campaign is going to live up to its expectations, right? To live up to its expectations.
Yeah.
And I know it's such a weird thing to say because there's so many things that can go out of your control, but how do you make sure that you become as consistent as you are? How do you make sure that you will be the person that people voted to be and not someone that people are like, okay, I'm now in power, let me just do things my way?
Yeah, it's difficult because I think once you're elected, some folks might even view you differently, and might assume things about the type of power you hold, what you actually can do. And even these past few weeks, I've been coping with folks and their expectations of and their thoughts about what I could do. And I'm not even elected, like I'm not even in office yet. We just won the race. I'm not even in office yet. So I've been grappling with that a little bit, but I do hope that people are assured that I will work harder than I've worked on the campaign. And we worked pretty damn hard there. So I can promise people my work ethic and that I will work hard. And I can promise people that I will be rooted in good intentions. Because that's how my parents raised me. That's how much I care about Palatine and the surrounding suburbs in the 51st district. And I will work every single day to make sure that my intentions are right. And that's what I can guarantee. And sometimes things won't turn out my way. Sometimes I'll go down to Springfield and things won't happen the way that I want, but I will fight for it to be not the way that I want, but the way that our community wants it to be. And making sure that like there will be disagreements that I might have with folks about how best to accomplish things, but working through those differences and finding solutions where we can and finding common ground where we can. So I'm hoping that people will even take a step back and realize that I am the 23-year-old, the 22-year-old that they voted for. I am the person that they might have put their time and their money behind, and things are going to be a bit busier, but I'm the same Nabeela that I was a year ago, that I was 2 years ago, and I hope to lead with that same heart.
My last question before I let you go is that there are going to be many more Nabeela Syeds in the future, regardless if
Yes.
they're Republican, Democrat, whatever party, and they are going to be going into a field where many people will tell them no because of their age or because of how they look or because of the type of person they are. What advice would you give to those people to encouraging them to continue to go forward, regardless of the possible rejections or what all the negative stuff that people will say as you are trying to reach your goal?
I will say that there will always be people that will say no, but you will find the people that will say yes, and you should keep them close. And you should believe in those folks that are motivating you, that are encouraging you, that care about you are saying. But you should also believe in yourself. And it's easy to let other people's opinions about you dictate how you act, deter you from doing things that you want to do. But if there's one thing that I learned, and it is cliche, it is cheesy, the thing that I could guarantee myself at times, and sometimes I couldn't guarantee myself this, was my trust in myself and my belief in myself. And I want to encourage any young people, all the future Nabeelas, but future whoever you are, is to think like that, to trust in yourself and trust in your ideas, and to be ambitious, and to believe that we do belong, and we should occupy space in every sort of field, in every space, just to make sure that our voices are being heard.
Well, whether it's the state of Ohio or the state of Illinois, you've inspired so many people, and I know you are going to continue to prove people wrong. You're going to inspire so many people in the future. And that's why the name of the podcast is called Oh My Curry Goodness, because, when we hear these crazy stories, it truly is a oh my curry goodness moment. Um, I really appreciate the time that you out of your busy schedule, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. And seriously, go be the reason why people voted for you. You're gonna do great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and it's an honor to be a guest on your show. Thank you. Bye.
That was Illinois State Representative-elect Nabeela Syed. I really had a great time talking to her. And we did have a lot of technical difficulties throughout this podcast, but I felt that at the end of the day, the conversations we had were really good and insightful. And I think, like I said in the introduction, and that she mentioned in the conversation, that you're going to have pushback, you're going to have people who will doubt you, but you just have to keep going. And that's the whole point. I feel like as young people, we just got to keep going. And no matter how hard it gets, we just have to continue to do it, because at the end of the day, we want to prove people wrong. We can't let what others say about us dictate our life or define us. So I was grateful that she was able to be a guest on this podcast, and I truly wish her the best, and I can't wait to see all the good things she does. Regarding this podcast, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And if you like what you saw or heard, feel free to subscribe to this podcast. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if you if you can. Also, maybe leave a review. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but you can also watch this podcast on YouTube as well if you're interested. I'm very thankful for the people who listened so far. I really had a great time, and I look forward to talking to more people about their personal stories. So thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.